Okay, so today I'm doing a couple homage reviews. Call them homage. And this one is another old piece I bought probably 10 years ago, so I don't even know if this one's still available. This one is made by a company in China called Chronotac, and it's called the Seamatic. And basically what it is a homage to the Rolex 1680 Submariners from 1970 to 1980 that were built. And it is a really cool piece. I'm not big on homages. I have this one and another review I'm doing of my Alpha, Paul Newman Daytona. The interesting part about them is you can pick them up relatively cheap. Now this one, shockingly, again, I'd have to look. I haven't been able to find it. This particular model, I think I paid $65 or $70 back 10 years ago. Now, what it is basically the replica companies, I believe, and don't quote me on this, but I believe they figured out another avenue to appease to people who watch collectors or watch people who don't want a replica, but they want the look of a particular model, like a Rolex Submariner of whatever particular era. So this one, obviously being the 1680, is a homage to that vintage and actually first generation of the Rolex Submariner that got the date Cyclops. Prior to this, there was the 5513, which is the no date. The case almost looks the same of the real Rolex. So basically, it's just with the date removed. 5513, 5512. From the 60s and up to 70, and before that was what the 5508 no crown guard version. So this one was I thought it was pretty interesting. It was a pretty cheap price too, so I couldn't pass it up. I think I bought this through their company, the website, and it arrived pretty quickly. This is probably about 2011, I want to say. And it's powered by DG2813, which is your typical cheap Chinese clone movement. However, it's been performing very well. It's keeping time very well. It's another piece that I don't really wear too much of, but I can't find a reason to sell it. It's just kind of cool factor, because I'm more into the vintage Rolex era of watches. So with what's going on with aftermarket parts and stuff, at this point I still don't feel comfortable about purchasing a real 1680. I have the newer subs, one of the newer subs, the 14060 and the 16610, which is the sapphire crystal version. But this one harks back to the 1680, which is the plastic crystal version era. And that era scratched like crazy. So that's when Rolex made the decision on the reference 16800, which is the successor to this one, and had a sapphire crystal that sat lower and is more closer to the next two generations that follow it, transition models you would call them, the 16800 and the 16610 was the last of that series. But this again harks back to the older vintage era of Rolex. What was cool is this one had they're not drilled out to the correct size, because I believe what they did is they fitted 20 millimeter, the equivalent of the Datejust spring bars to it, because on a real 1680 you would see the ends of the spring bars flush with the case almost. So for $65, what can you expect, right? So but it's got that cool look. It does the loom is there at night. It's they did it pretty clever because of this time or era of watch, they used tritium. They weren't using radium; they were using tritium in the 1680s. And after about 12 and a half years, which is half-life of tritium, it would barely glow. You could see it after your eyes adjusted, but it wouldn't be as bright as it was when it was manufactured new. And I believe, and I was told, because I never had one new, like a tritium dial, but they weren't that bright to begin with, even brand new off out of Rolex or any of the watch companies that use tritium. They were just, but the benefit was they were consistent and didn't need charging. This lume kind of mimics that, the caramel aged effect, the patina effect of the lume color. You can see that it's got that tan or caramel brown, and that's the tritium aging with the sunlight and the fact that the radiation kind of creates a, chemical burn or whatever it causes it. But they kind of match that. But if you hit a blue light to it, and it's daytime, I couldn't show you, it does have a glow to it, and it glows just like you would think almost what a older aged tritium dial would glow. It glows for maybe 30 minutes, and it's just real faint, very, very light. So I think they nailed that right on the head. They did a good job with that. Let me take a stand here. So yeah, it's I love the 1680. I would love to buy one, but they are probably starting at $10,000, $9,000 to $10,000, and those are pretty beat up models. And the problem is there's so many aftermarket parts out for these now. The bezel, the insert, you'll see a lot of them with service dial in hands. This doesn't say Swiss less than 25, which would be the correct at the 6 o'clock under the 6 o'clock correct designation. This one says nothing. So the service dials would be white, and they would glow in the dark after you hit them with some light, and it would say usually Swiss there. That's when you know you got tritium. You can tell too because it doesn't have the caramel patina and just the overall color. But this one they got right. No Swiss or Swiss 25 obviously at the dial, but they're not trying to replicate 100% the Rolex 1680. They're just trying to give you the taste of it. But I think they did a pretty good job. The movement, again, is the GG2813, which finds its way into a lot of the entry-level replicas, because then if you spend a little bit more, usually from what I can tell, you get an ETA movement clone. So this one is obviously doesn't feel very good. It feels like you're running it through sand, as they say often. That's just the build quality of these movements. But they do last, and they do keep decent time. So this being already, 11 or 9 years old, it's still, if I pull it out of the box and wind it and set it, a day later it's still going, even off my wrist, and it's still keeping good time. So it is what it is. For $65, how can you beat it, right? No exhibition case back, which I like. I really don't like the exhibition case back at all on watches. I don't know if that would be considered correct. Almost looks like a bubble back case back, which would be more to the older Rolexes, but it has your oyster, standard oyster. This clasp right here, period correctness that's not accurate. This is the basic Rolex clasp, 7836. Most of these dive watches would be fitted with a diver's bracelet, which is bigger, clasp, and it would have the diver's extension, which they really started on in 1970 when this watch came out. So if you find one used for a cheap price, I'd say go for it if you're looking for that vintage feel without going, without going into the replica arena, which is, you know, even I have a problem with sometimes. It's tempting sometimes, but, you know, it's just a whole other topic for another day. But, yeah, that's your Chronotac Seamatic. And I've actually showered with it, and it held up pretty good. But I believe the crystal is not this whole. I've taken these. I've looked at some of these. I actually took this apart, maybe when I first got it, and the crystal is actually it's not attached like a normal Rolex, where it has a retaining pressure fit ring that goes over first, and then the bezel clicks onto it with like it'll have a washer, a friction washer. It's not your traditional build, but a lot of these replicas and homages of this price range don't have that. Well, I shouldn't say all, but some do. There are some replicas that do have genuine build quality, but this is not one of them. This is more like a spring, just a kind of a long wire spring that holds this on. But again, for $65, I think, you know, at the time of the price of that price was, you know, cheap. So once you taste your old vintage 1680 Rolex Submariner dive watch, I don't think you could beat it. And still, it's keeping perfect time. Screw in the screw links. Again, if you're going to take these out with the screw links, go ahead and put you some Loctite in the threads and adjust it. And yeah, it's got the polished ends, which wouldn't be typical of a dive. The dive bracelet would have the brushed ends. But you know, it's not trying to be a perfect replica. It's a homage. So you find one and you like the vintage style, go for it if you can pick it up cheap enough. Thank you.